Welcome back to Man Across New Horizons. I'm Daddy. I shall see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhollow today. We'll be vibing out as per usual. Talking about, and what else do we have left on our birthday arc that we can still talk about? Like, I suppose I could talk about the tarot card deck. I don't know, I've already talked about tarot cards like 3 times before or something. I don't know why it's such a common topic of conversation, but yeah, basically the long and short of it is one of my friends, two of my friends actually, they gave me a tarot card deck. And apparently that, not apparently that's a good thing, it was, one of them actually told me before that apparently it's unlucky to buy your first one, so, you know, that's, I guess, a lucky thing that they bought it for me, and I don't really know if it inverts that way, but anyway, hello everyone, right now in Fawnhollow, 6:11pm on Friday, September 9th, 2022. But I have already spoken about tarot cards twice before. I feel like there was something else I wanted to speak about. I could talk about museums, I suppose, because we did go around looking around a museum, but there's not really much to say because I didn't spend a huge amount of time there. Oh, you know what? So I might talk about tarot cards another day. I think I can talk about. Maybe we could talk about both. I don't really know. But anyway, it's my birthday. Went down to London, all that good stuff. And you know, one thing that London is known for is museums. You know, because, well, I mean, you know the ongoing joke about British museums and their acquisition, I suppose, of how we got some of those things, which is, you know, not great, I suppose, but me and a few friends went to the V&A, which is the Victoria and Albert Museum, because it's a museum I haven't actually been to before. If I've been to it, I don't really remember much of it in the first place. Now, V&A is apparently it's a very old museum, and I don't really know much about it except for I was just like, I want to go there because they have like cool arts, like artsy sort of like weird exhibits, and namely they had, and we'll get onto that for a second. They had like a lot of cool things. They had a lot like a fashion thing, which is pretty cool. They had like fashion through the ages, especially for women's clothing, and I was like, that's pretty cool. They had an exhibit going on, which was like, I mean, you can see the exhibits which are going on right now in V&A. One of them was like fashion from Africa, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And I was like, how? But it was like you had to pay to get in, and I was like, I'm gonna pay that much money to get in or whatever. Especially because there's so much of V&A I haven't even looked at in the first place. It's a bit silly to not, you know, at least indulge in the free stuff first. But yeah, we spent some time looking around at some like architectural things at the beginning. I can't even remember what it is because I know essentially nothing about sort of like history and architecture and all that jazz. It was just sort of like interesting to look at, like all these monumental sort of structures and sculptures that people have built, or like casts of them, and you know, you can certainly feel the history there. Even though as I say, I'm not someone who's particularly like infused by history or anything like that, you can certainly, yeah, it's certainly quite almost overwhelming to see. Like one of them was like this giant tower. I can't even remember what it was called. Like, was it a crucible? I don't think maybe it was a crucible or something. I don't really recall, but it was like this massive tower, just like it was. I can't even remember how tall it was, but it was huge. And you know, I was just like talking to one of my friends, just being like, man, I wonder how long it like took to make that. Like how much effort it essentially went into it. Like the amount of detail which is in like all of these sort of like art pieces, despite the fact that a lot of people probably won't even see the tiny detail, because this thing was like, I think it was like 15 meters tall or something, maybe. More or less. And I was like, imagine just like working on this, and you're working on something which is at like, you know, meter 12 or something. Like no one's gonna see it, but still probably like an excruciating amount of detail was carved into it. And then, you know, we saw a lot of people sculptures and that sort of thing. And of course, you know, the sculptures are just incredible. You know, I was just like talking to a friend about it, being like, oh, you know, the amount of like dedication they had to sculptures, because they were like trained from super young ages, which is not something you see so commonly, I suppose, anymore. It's like they were trained to be a sculptor, and that was basically what they were going to be for the rest of their life or something. So the amount of like technique and skill that they can put on to show when we're like sculpturing people, like, you know, sculpturing, you know, people and their flesh and like even muscles that you can sort of see like underneath, etc. And obviously people can do but there are amazing sculptors in the modern day, of course, and that's, you know, not disparage their efforts and their talent. Like there was that really popular one a couple of years back, which I think it became popular because of a meme. It was just like like a woman like wrapped in like a silk cloth or something, you know, nude, because for whatever reason all the sculptures are done nude, and it's a very sort of like artistic movement thing, I suppose, like freedom of body and expression or something. I don't really know. Or like a silk, like just like a silk sheet or something, like wrapped like around her and like blowing on the wind, and it like got popular because of a meme or whatever, because people were just like, oh, you know, why would some guy, you know, sculpt this? And it was just like, oh yeah, now she, like, this woman chiseled it or whatever. I don't know, which was... Hello. What's this notification I got? Oh, I see. That sort of surprised me because I wasn't expecting to get like any particular notification on my phone, at least. So yeah. Anyway, she did a fantastic job. You know, it's amazing how much detail you can get into the sculptures. You know, just like the individual folds of fabric like that. And there's little like sort of see-throughness that you get between fabrics which are thin enough and the light shines through them. Don't know how they do it, and obviously it takes an incredible amount of patience, skill, and dedication, and years of experience, almost certainly. But yeah, there was a lot of good stuff like that. Like there was that popular, the famous statue was I can't remember what it's called. It's in Animal Crossing. The fake version, you know, where he's got books tucked under his arm. What's that famous statue called? Hold on. Famous marble statue. It's not this one. It's this one. What's it called? Michelangelo's David. I don't know if it was the actual one. Let's see. Michelangelo David. Almost certainly it was a cast, but still. V&A, unless it was like on tour. I don't really know what on earth it was going on, but yeah, it was pretty impressive. Okay, yeah, it was a cast. There was a cast of it. Makes sense because most things are cast. You know, you don't really want to just put like because it was so close that you can like literally touch it if you wanted to. You're not allowed to, and I didn't. But you probably don't want something that important and historic to be just like within arm's reach of, you know, the public. There's a lot of cool things like that. But the most important thing which I wanted to see was the fact there was a Beatrix Potter exhibit going on. You know, it was limited time, and you know, it was pretty cheap to get in. It was like £9, or you can donate an extra £2 to the museum, which I did. And I wanted to go because I really like Beatrix Potter. You know, I love the sort of like whimsical sort of spin she puts on like just generic sort of humdrum British life, I suppose. But not in the guise, but under in the style, well, not in the style where it literally is in a children's book. It's so just sort of like charming and quaint in a certain way, because I used to read a lot of Beatrix Potter books when I was younger, especially. Like I really loved them. Which is my favourite one? I don't really know, because to be fair, I did read them when I was quite young, so I'm not sure if it really the concept of having much of a way in the favour really resonated with me back then. Probably Benjamin Rabbit is one I read the most. I'm not really sure if that's true though, but we had a lot of them. We had like a whole, not a whole entire collection, but we had quite a few. We had like 20 or something of them, and we used to sit on our bookshelf and I used to read through them, or at least look at the pretty pictures of them quite often. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say Beatrix Potter's like my idol or anything, because I don't know if that's necessarily true, but she's certainly someone I like to draw inspiration from. You know, she's someone who has a strong mix of both artistic talents and scientific talents and interests of herself. You know, she was very, obviously she's quite artistically talented. She, you know, could write very good books, engaging stories, especially for children. She was a fantastic illustrator, because she did all these things. She was very fascinated with nature and wildlife and that sort of thing, so that's why all the books that she ended up writing for children were about wildlife, or about wildlife creatures, I suppose, anthropomorphized in the sense that they have adventures and are not just sort of like animals that we can't communicate with, in a sense. But she also had like a very sort of scientific mind about her. You know, she was extremely fascinated by nature and all that, all those sort of things. So she was extremely fascinated by biology and all that as well. Like, she was fascinated by animals. Like the typical sort of like biologist thing, not biologist thing, where we're sort of like completely unnerved by, you know. I don't know how to phrase this, but I phrased it through a story where, you know, like apparently like her pet rabbit died or something, and instead of just, you know, like mourning it necessarily, well, she sort of like, it's so strange to say, but she like not carved off its skin, or carved off its fur, I suppose, and like turned it into a pelt and like analysed it or something, or like dissected her pet rabbit. I think it was a pet rabbit, at least. It's obviously something which is so incredibly bizarre, but to her, of course, it must have been incredibly interesting, and probably like one of the best things that her pet could have done for her would have been like to further teach her, I suppose, about something she loved, right? I don't know necessarily, but I found it very fascinating, because the exhibit was basically all about her life. There was apparently an extra exhibit about one of her stories, but I didn't go to it because I instead got distracted by a different fashion exhibit. But still, it basically like talked about her life and that sort of thing, like how she randomly became a children's author and illustrator, a creator of children's novels. I'm not sure if novels is particularly the right word. We're not particularly like big books or anything, these Beatrix Potter books. Have I talked about Beatrix Potter before? I feel like I must have. I almost certainly feel like I must have, but I'm going to quickly just, search my videos, just see. Beatrix. I have talked about Beatrix Potter when I was day 702. So... I don't know. No, I guess it's not really talking about her stories now. This is more talking about like her and herself and her story, or her story, but than her stories. But I guess I'm talking about the V&A. But this is just like one of the coolest exhibits. Well, for me personally, of course. I'm trying to remember bits and pieces. Like she grew up in like the countryside-ish. I can't remember the exact area off the top of my head. And when she like moved out or whatever, then like the whole reason she started writing these books in the first place was because she was writing these letters to, I can't even remember who it was off the top of my head, like a stepmother or something, and it was to give to like her children. No, it can't be stepmother. That doesn't make any sense. It was like cousin's mother. I don't know. Oh, was it? She was like writing to her nieces and nephews or something, and she wrote like these letters about like these stories of like these woodland creatures, and apparently the children found it very, very fascinating and entertaining. Like the person that she wrote it to was just like, hey, maybe you should like write these as actual books or whatnot. And she did, and they were like massive hits and successes. And she also liked to do these illustrations that came alongside it. Like I can't remember what the name of the illustration was called. I probably should have taken pictures more of the exhibits. It's more like I've understood the feel of what the exhibits had taught me, but the actual facts have sort of escaped my brain right now. Yeah, so she used to do like these sort of like splash art. I don't know, these like end title screens of I don't know what you call them, basically like these big illustrations like at the end of the stories or between stories to sort of like break up the stories, that give your eyes a rest from all the text and the dialogue. And one of the most interesting things I found out was her inspiration for what's the tale called, like the tale of Gloucester's Tailors. Hold on, Beatrix Potter Gloucester. It's actually one of the ones I don't think I've read all that well. Tailor of Gloucester, that's it. Where basically the entire reason that she even wrote the story in the first place was she was actually visiting the V&A back in the day, because the V&A is incredibly old, and she was born around late 19th century. I think. Don't quote me on that. Why quote me on that when I could just Google it myself? Beatrix Potter, 1866, and died 1943. She was born in South Kensington, apparently. Which is it's basically right next to V&A, so that makes sense. So yeah, the inspiration for the Tale of Gloucester is that she went to V&A. She was like looking for exhibits, and she saw this waistcoat or whatever on display in one of the exhibits, and she basically just like drew it. She went to V&A. It's a very common thing for, I think, artistic students especially to do, to go to V&A and do like drawings, like learn from the predecessor before us. And she drew the waistcoat or whatever, and it became basically her inspiration for Tale of Two Cities. Not Tale of Two Cities, sorry, Tale of Gloucester. Tailor of Gloucester. And they had that like on that waistcoat on display, be like, this is the exact waistcoat, this is a drawing that she did. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I was joking with my friend about it, to be like, oh, what if I came to V&A, right now, and I like went to that fashion, because we went to a fashion exhibit, and I was like, what if I just drew this, having like the V&A can have an exhibit on me in like 100 years in the future, being like, oh, it's where dear darling, she drew this particular dress and it inspired her story or whatever have you, or played a key role in the story that she made. I'd be like, that'd be pretty cool. So, maybe I should do that at some point. But yeah, there's a lot of cool things about Beatrix Potter. And then, like, at some point in her life, she retired and became a farmer. She loved nature, of course, so she partnered with the Nature Reserve in the UK. Is that what it's called? Nature Trust? National Trust. Is that right? Is this the right logo? No, this doesn't seem right. Oh no, that's National. I searched Nature Trust again. I meant National Trust. yeah, I believe she partnered up with National Trust to like preserve a huge amount of like the countryside, so it didn't get taken over by like industrialization, which is why so much of it, I suppose, is still preserved to this day or whatever, which is like awesome, you know. She had a passion and she used it to like fuel, you know, not only her livelihood and life and her other sort of passions in first place, and then it sort of like all came full circle where she could use the money and all that she raised from those books, which she created from her passion in the first place, to again preserve her passion for, you know, future generations. I was like, that's awesome, bitch, Twitter, you go, girl. Sorry, that was just a very weird thing to say, but yeah, she basically did that, and I was like, that's super cool, you know, that's awesome. Anyway, she was like a farmer. She retired, I think, from a Lake District or something, and yeah, that was basically like the story of her life. She didn't, well, as a farmer, she didn't really do much, you know, else noteworthy. I don't think she wrote any more books or anything, so that's kind of where the exhibit stopped. I was like, that's just pretty cool to see through. I wondered if it was going to be exhibit more about Beatrix Potter's sort of like the stories and she wrote and that sort of thing, but it wasn't really. It was but there was, as I said, there was apparently an extra exhibit about one of the stories. I don't even know what stories it was because I only got told about it by one of the people who were running the entrance to the exhibit. She was like, oh yeah, there's an extra one if you're interested. But she was like, oh, I also can't remember what story it's about. And I was like, yeah, that's fair enough. But she wrote quite a few stories or whatever. I didn't go to see it because instead, you know, because we're talking about V&A, got distracted. I suppose it's a bit strange talking about V&A in the light of most recent news. You know, I don't really broach these sort of subjects in my Animal Crossing videos because I think it's not necessarily as macabre per se, but it's sort of just like, you know, I feel like news outlets probably do a better job than I would. But yes, I might as well sort of like talk about the elephant in the room. But yes, if you have seen the news recently, Queen Elizabeth II, the reigning queen for like the past 70 years in the UK, has passed away peacefully, I hear. Hopefully surrounded by loved ones and all that as well. So, you know, that was quite a monumental occasion, you know. You might be like, how am I affected by this? How do I feel about it? I don't have particularly like any ties to the royal family or anything like that. I don't have much investment in them. They just sort of, you know, in my day and age, I suppose, the younger generation don't really care too much about royal family. I more or less see them sort of as a symbol of part of like UK history, of course, but much more in the sense that they're much more like but they don't obviously have any control over like how the country's run or anything like that. They're just sort of more like not like a tourism trap per se, but like just more like a remnant of UK history that which, you know, we're not going to get rid of just because it means a lot, so to say. But Queen Elizabeth II, you know, Queen Lizzie, as people like to say. I'm not sure I can call her that because I'm not nearly that colloquial with her, but yes, she did actually pass away yesterday evening. It's quite a shock because, you know, especially because she's been, you know, the Queen all my life. Like, I remember celebrating her Golden Jubilee, like 50 years of her reign, back when I was very small. Yeah, and it's just wild. The way I described it, at least to my friends and, you know, most people ask, is like, I'm not necessarily like sad about it because, you know, I think she was probably at peace with it. You know, she probably knew that she was quite old and eventually it was going to happen. Of course, you know, everyone passes away at some point. But it just, the way I describe it is, it kind of feels like the end of an era. And it is, I mean, like, quite literally the end of her reign, so I guess the end of her era. But it, you know, in a different sense, like in a more, not in a personal sense, but just like, yeah, it's just a very big event, which was surprising. Both surprising and unsurprising at the same time. Anyway, so yeah, elephant in the room, talk about that. I just say that because V&A, well, I assume V&A is actually named after Queen Victoria. And I think her husband was Albert. I'm not actually sure if that's right, by the way. Don't quote me on, like, UK history or anything. I don't know, I'm going to be perfectly honest. But yeah, so in V&A they had another exhibit which is basically about women's fashion, like, throughout the ages. And I took a lot of pictures about that because I'm just like, you know, artsy students, they like to draw things, like, while we're at the Victoria Albert Museum or whatever, because it's, like, great references. I like fashion. Why don't I take a load of pictures of fashion and then, you know, draw them or something at some point in the future, or at least have them as a reference which I can use to sort of fall back on at any point where I'm just like, oh, you know, I need sort of inspiration for clothing items. So there really are quite a lot of them, you know. Some of them were, I read bits and pieces of like signage saying like exactly what sort of like era it's from, like what it represents, or like why things were designed in a certain way. But there was a lot of it, and I was just sort of more interested in seeing what was going on, I think, in the first place. I don't know what was necessarily my favourite era, but there was one dress I actually really liked. I think it was quite a modern one, which is probably why I liked it. I was like, oh, you know, I would actually wear that if I had it. Was it this one? This was 1975. I don't know, it wasn't that one. It was... I definitely took a photo of it. Was it that one? I didn't think it was that one. Oh, here it is. It's this one. Oh, I didn't take... Oh, no, I do have a picture of a sign. 1953. Well, at least that's the sort of region it was in. I don't know if that one's actually the 1953 one. No, oh, but might be that one, 1958 one. It was the evening dress. It's basically like was black dress. It's sort of got like a load of ruffles and quite lacy along the sleeves and that sort of thing. And I was like, that's really pretty. I'm not gonna lie. No, it turns out fashion designers, they know what they're doing when it comes to fashion. But it's wild to see like the fashion and how it evolved over years. It's something like I would love to learn about, but obviously I'm not obviously. I'm never gonna, you know, like it's like, you know. I'm sure everyone has this sort of thing. You'll be like, oh yeah, I'd love to go to university to learn about this sort of thing. But obviously I don't want to do it because one, university's expensive. Two, it is at the end of the day just sort of a hobby. It seems a bit of a waste to go to university for if it's not going to be something I'm going to make much more out of. You know, I'd rather go to like classes or do, you know, my own sort of like self-teaching, self-learning for. And yeah, free university is expensive. I mean, I suppose, and also a lot of work. I might say, you know, like you know, it's very difficult to do university while balancing, you know, like a full-time job or anything else like that. But, you know, it's certainly one of the subjects I'd be like, oh, I'd love to go to university, you know. I'd love to get the knowledge you would get from taking a university course about fashion, is basically what I'd say. Because fashion is always so fascinating for me. Even though I'm not like a super fashion fanatic, like I don't follow all the latest trends and that sort of thing. I'm just like, I suppose it's more like the concept of fashion and how it evolves interests me. And the different types of it, rather than necessarily having a sort of like encyclopedic knowledge and always being on the cutting edge of exactly what the latest fashion trends are. It's just like, it's kind of cool, you know, don't you think? And I love to see always different people's fashions and how they express themselves and that sort of thing. I wonder if I should talk about... No, I probably have talked about fashion at this point. I've talked about so many different things in Animal Crossing, and it's a miracle I haven't quite yet run out of conversations, but I'm sure I will in the future. Yeah, so that was a V&A exhibit. There was a lot of other exhibits going on, and obviously, you know, it was a group of 6 of us, and, you know, we split up and reconvened at certain points. Like two of my friends, they went to go see, or at least tried to go see, like, there was an exhibit about men, masculinity in fashion, or that sort of thing, and I was like, that sounds pretty cool, but, you know, I'll try and check it out maybe afterwards, because I want to see the Beatrix Potter exhibit, so I did that one first. They didn't actually go to it in the end, because apparently the entrance fee was like £28 or something. It was quite expensive compared to, you know, just the Beatrix Potter exhibit, which was £9. And I assume they're priced that way, you know, because of the scale of things which is going on. But to be fair, a lot of them are priced that way because, you know, the V&A kind of want you to become a member, because that's where they get a lot of their funding from, I assume. Or at least a lot of their sort of like extra funding. And I assume museums are kind of like publicly funded by the government. I'd hope so. They should be, if they're not. But yeah, that's where they get a lot of their, like, sort of like extra funding or whatnot. Like, and apparently, you know, being a member is actually pretty cool. If I lived closer to V&A, I probably would be a member, to be perfectly honest. You know, visit it more often, see all their exclusive like exhibits, workshops, etc., etc. I think it'd be pretty cool, to be perfectly honest. But you know, unfortunately, it costs money, and it's not going to be worth it for me because it's quite a bit of travel, I will say. But yeah, on the whole, you know, V&A, it's a pretty cool thing. Like, if you ever go to London has a lot of cool museums. You know, got the Natural Science Museum. What? The Natural History Museum, sorry. I was like, that's not right. There's Natural History Museum and the Science Museum. Both are very cool museums. The Science Museum I absolutely loved and adored when I was younger. The Natural History Museum is always pretty cool, especially with a giant T-Rex they always have, or giant dinosaur bones they always have, like, right at the entranceway. V&A is obviously quite a good one as well. What sort of big museums are there? I'm not that well versed in London museums, but there's a huge amount of like all sorts, and there's loads of tiny different ones as well. Museum in London, British Museum. I don't know how I missed that one. I said like British History Museum or something, didn't I? Which is not what I meant. Combine those two. National Gallery, that's a good one as well. Maritime Museum, I've heard of. Wallace Collection, that's a pretty good one, I've heard. I think I've actually been to Wallace Collection. See, there's so many museums that I actually don't even remember which ones I've been to and whatnot. Yeah, if you like museums and you ever come to London, certainly I'd recommend you check them out. There's a lot of good ones. I mean, there's a lot of good ones in lots of different countries. And yeah, that's basically all I've got to say. V&A is pretty cool if you like sort of fashion much more. It feels certainly a lot more modern. But there's a good mix of like historical things and modern things. Perhaps not quite as modern as necessarily the Science Museum, as the Science Museum's filled with all be sort of like very interactive gadgets and gizmos and exhibits, because that's kind of like what it's all about. But yeah, I guess I'll round off this episode here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Any likes, comments, subscription, shares are greatly appreciated. Join me Dear Darling Discord, follow me on Twitter down below. Hope we see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.